In surprisingly good news, Bernie Sanders' resolution to end United States' support to Saudi Arabia as they carry out a literal genocide in Yemen has just advanced. And I'm honestly not really sure how to wrap my head around this story because it's difficult to comprehend good news coming from the United States Senate. It's almost always bad news. But here we have an example of them actually listening to the will of the people and what we want them to do. The last time this happened was when they passed the CRA joint resolution to undo the FCC's repeal of net neutrality. But here they are. They're advancing this resolution to stop our support to Saudi Arabia, and they're undermining the White House. Now, as Elena Skor of Politico reports, the Senate delivered a stunning rebuke to the Trump administration on Wednesday, voting overwhelmingly to advance a measure yanking U.S. support for Saudi-backed forces at war in Yemen. The 63-37 vote, in which 14 Republicans joined every Democrat in voting to move forward on the bipartisan Saudi resolution, came hours after Secretary of State Mike Pompeo and Defense Secretary Jim Mattis failed to sway key undecided senators with an appeal to hold off lest they upset progress on a ceasefire in Yemen. The Senate has to take another vote expected next week in order to formally open debate on U.S. policy towards the Saudis that seeks to punish them further for Khashoggi's killing. But even the success of Wednesday's initial vote was a jab at the White House, which is defending the Saudis ahead of the G20 summit that Prince Mohammed bin Salman will attend. The White House issued a statement warning of a recommended Trump veto if the resolution were to pass, stating that it would harm bilateral relationships in the region and negatively impact the ability of the United States to prevent the spread of violent extremist organizations. So the justification that the White House is using to issue this veto threat is just downright disgusting because there's no justification for us to continue supporting Saudi Arabia. I mean, we're literally giving them the bombs that they're using on children. No justification for it. So this veto threat is disgusting in and of itself, but I do want to go to Bernie Sanders, who released a video on Twitter that gives us a little bit of details about the status of this resolution and what's going to happen from here.
Let me thank all of the people at the grassroots level throughout our country who helped us today win a major vote on the path toward ending U.S. involvement in the war in Yemen. But let me caution everybody, given the extremely obscure and complicated rules of the United States Senate, this fight is far from over. What we won this afternoon was a vote to discharge our resolution out of the Foreign Relations Committee. And that was a major, major victory. But what we have got to do is continue our effort to make sure that we end up winning the resolution to proceed, to go forward. And then finally, we have got to win final passage on this legislation. And what we did today was of enormous significance. This is a really important step forward. And what this fight, as you all know, is about is three fundamental things. Number one, what's going on in Yemen now is a horrific humanitarian disaster. We're talking about the reality of 85,000 children in the last few years starving to death. And what the United Nations tells us is that millions more people are facing imminent starvation. In Yemen today, which has always been a poor country, but in Yemen today, what we're looking at is 10,000 new cases every single week of cholera, which then lays people open to all kinds of other illnesses and death. So what we are saying is that the United States of America, in our resolution, has got to get out of that war. And instead of being part of the killing in Yemen, we have got to do everything we can to bring peace to that country and humanitarian aid so that we stop this horrific humanitarian disaster. Second thing that this resolution does is it tells the despotic dictatorship in Saudi Arabia that we are no longer going to be an appendage to their military adventurism. While Yemen has always been a poor country, the famine And the death there right now, the people dying, is a result of Saudi-led intervention in an ongoing civil war. And what we are saying in this resolution, which moved forward today, is that the United States will not continue to be part of that intervention. And the third point that we are making is that after decades and decades where the United States Congress, under both Democratic and Republican presidents, has abdicated its constitutional responsibility to be the body that, under our Constitution, determines whether the United States engages in war. It's not the President of the United States who decides whether we get into a war in Yemen or anyplace else. Constitution, Article 1 of the Constitution is very clear. It is the Congress. So what this resolution does for the first time is it says Congress is going to take back its constitutional responsibility for engaging in war. So this is a very, very big deal. But we have got to continue going forward together. I wish I could tell you exactly when the next votes on this resolution will be. That's something that is being worked on right now in the Senate. As you may know, any one senator can object to a unanimous consent and prevent us from going forward in a way that we would like to. So we don't know exactly when the vote for final passage will be. Maybe it'll be tomorrow, maybe even tonight, maybe next week, I don't know. But let us keep going together. Let us put pressure on the United States Senate, and let us make it crystal clear to the world that the United States of America is not going to continue to be part of this horrible Saudi-led intervention in Yemen's civil war, which is causing so much death and so much misery. Let's keep going together. Thank you very much.
So there you have it. This is absolutely fantastic news, and I'm honestly shocked that this was able to advance. That means that there were some Republicans that decided to do the right thing, maybe for the first time in their lives. So this is great news, and I really hope that this does pass. Even if it gets vetoed, Donald Trump, put your stamp on this. Show the American people that you are in favor of genocide in Yemen and you have absolutely no morality whatsoever. You care more about weapons and the money we get from selling weapons to Saudi Arabia than the actual lives that are being lost in Yemen currently. And that's absolutely disgusting, but I don't want to go into a rant because I think that when we rarely see good news coming out of DC, we need to take all the wins and celebrate them and hang on to them because this is great. So, I think I've said this is great like 10 times throughout the course of this video, but it's honestly shocking, and I'm a little bit taken aback by this news today.
Support this podcast by becoming a patron at patreon.com/Humanist Report.